Imagine knowing exactly what your students are learning and exactly which steps you need to take next.
Join us in Down with the Reading Quiz to craft meaningful and productive formative assessments that move away from gotcha moments of basic recall and toward assessing what your students actually can do.
In this 30-minute free masterclass, we'll share 3 powerful assessment keys that work for any novel at any time of the year.
Head to shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to sign up, and we'll also send you a free workbook to keep track of all your notes.
Once again, that's shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to nail formative assessments forever.
Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Marie.
What are you up to later? Want to join me for happy hour?
I'm all in.
And guess what's amazing? Our listeners and friends of the podcast can also join us because Brave New Teaching Happy Hour has officially launched. Cheers!
Cheers, everyone. We are officially hanging out a little bit longer after school with an extended, extra private podcast feed just for you.
Yes. Members of Happy Hour get extra 15 minutes of the podcast, give or take, because you know us, we run a little bit long. It's just kind of how we are. But if you would like to get in on this Happy Hour action, please join us. It is only $5 a month. Head to curriculumrehab.com/happy hour and get yourself signed up, because when you're there, Amanda, tell our friends what we do every month for our Happy Hour members.
I think my favorite part is coming up with a new free resource for our listeners every month. And then we pretty much break down that resource and how to use it. We also like to have guests on to do extended episodes and even Q&A that's just for you about that resource. It's really exclusive and super private just for you.
So if you are like us and you like hanging out, you like chit-chatting about all things that are teaching, teacher life, and everything under that umbrella, join us for happy hour and we will see you there. Bye.
Bye.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Brave New Teaching. Today, we have some very timely ideas for you and a process for planning your first week back to school. This process will work if you are actually live and in person. If you're listening to this sometime in the future when the craziness of COVID-19 is past us, hopefully gone forever. And if you are listening to this right here, right now, in the late summer of 2020, this will also work for distance learning. Hi, Amanda.
Hey, everybody. So excited to talk to you today. I don't know, guys, this is my 13th year of teaching right now in 2020. And I feel like every year in August, I start to think, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'm like, okay, well, Amanda, like you know what you're going to do because you've been doing it forever. And for whatever reason, it always feels new again. And like you forgot how to do it all. And I think that's because just life and the world, everything changes and we get older and we get new ideas and we always want to make things better. So when Marie and I were talking today, we're like, well, let's just kind of go through not just like a giant list of ideas, but a game plan of how to select through all of those ideas, because we know you guys have no shortage of ideas. And if you do, we'll definitely mention our favorites. But I think like navigating through the chaos and sorting out like what goes where, when, and why, like that's what's really important and hard to do.
Well, and it also creates an amount of flexibility, right, for in the future. Because I get the same way too. I'm going into year 14 and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Even though I have some pretty tried and true activities and like mini lessons and that sort of thing for the first week, but I still kind of just like, I don't know. Do I want to do any, like, so having this like process, and it's not like anything crazy long. In fact, we've created a PDF for you of exactly the steps that we're going to talk you through for figuring out what you're going to do in the first week of school and some ideas for each of those steps along the way. So make sure you head to the show notes, bravenewteaching.com, to download that PDF. And I think we should just jump into it, don't you?
I think we should.
All right, cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, a podcast for educators challenging the status quo. I'm Amanda, and I'm a high school English teacher in Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm also a high school English teacher in Southern California. We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show.
guys, so here's what we're going to walk you through today. Our PDF is something that is going to help you guys get yourselves organized. So don't forget to download it, print it, and throw it into your planner. Use your very first binder clip to put it in your brand spanking new planner. What we want to walk you through, guys, is how to plan your first week of school. So Maria and I are going to kind of talk you through 3 general checkpoints. So I'd say that your first step is to let everything just assemble in your brain. So gather all the things, all of your ideas, all of that inspiration you've seen on Pinterest, on Instagram, from your friends who are teachers across the state or whatever. Get it all together. Don't rule anything out at the beginning. And then find a time and a space where you can just brain dump everything into one spot.
And sometimes this brain dump, for me, will often look like absolute chicken scratch madness in one of my notebooks. Like right now, I am currently working out of a teal blue notebook with pink and purple sparkly unicorns all over it because it gives me joy when I bring it out of my bag every single day and it's just lined paper, whatever. So my brain dumps look like me going through Pinterest, going through Instagram, going through old notebooks and old planners, like teacher planners, looking at my old lesson plans, figuring out what I like, what I didn't, even scouring TPT. Maybe if you're listening to this the day it comes out, TPT is having a back to school sale. So hop on that, and finding all those ideas, and I just scratch them down into as many pages as it takes. Amanda, yours generally look a little bit different though.
Mine's definitely a more on my computer and on my phone because I do a lot of screenshotting. I'm in some really killer Facebook groups for AP Lang and for some other things, and I try to save posts all the time when I'm just scrolling. So I sit and I actually I do have a notebook as well, but I sit in front of my Facebook saves, my Instagram saves, and all of the things on my camera roll that I've screenshotted, and I get it all together, at least in the same browser. I might not have it all together in the same place physically, but my list that I will eventually get to is going to be based on all of the things from everywhere. And I think the reason I say this is number 1 is because I feel the tendency around this time of year to start trying to ignore things and just try to stay focused. But I also think it's kind of pointless to stay focused when you don't know what your focus is. So let it all happen. Let it all dig in a little bit to this, a little bit to that, let it all just kind of come together. And when we move to number 2, we can start to sort things out. But
absolutely.
Let all the random things come together. It's cool.
Well, why fight it, right? Because you never know when inspiration is going to strike. I get these nervous jitters that well, what if I don't come up with a great idea? What if I don't find something that works? Well, just let it all in. And then once you can satisfy that shiny object syndrome, let that happen, get all the stuff, get all the ideas, and then you can move on. Shall we move on to number 2?
Yeah, because literally, Marie, this happened to you today.
I know.
This happened to you today. You had an amazing idea that after we talked about what we're going to talk about number 2, you changed your mind.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if number 1 is gather it all, dump it somewhere when you're ready. So this might be, for me, I do need to wait until I'm a little closer to the starting line. I can't do this in June. I have to do this August blank. But number 2 would be to decide what matters to you. What matters to you the first week of school, the first 5 days, the first 3.5 days? What matters? And so when Marie and I kind of made our list, the things that matter to us in no particular order would be A, setting classroom norms or expectations, B, establishing routines, C, checking in on our skills, seeing what our kids can and can't do, and D, community building. And I'm sure if you're listening, you're thinking, how the heck do you do all 4 of those things in just 1 week with your activities? And we'll get there. But that's generally what matters to me in the start of school. And every year, I think that community building definitely takes the what do I want to say? The throne.
It takes most of the energy, right? Of that first week, it takes the focus, and for good reason. That's also the philosophy under which you and I operate, is that relationships first, community first, because quite frankly, everything else can stem off of there from a really positive place versus like this overbearing. Yeah. It basically, I look at it, I mean, it sounds like a lot. Those items sound like a lot to cover in 1 week, but that's where, when you move forward and start planning, right? When we get into our number 3, that's where like the creativity and the design and the artistry starts to come in, because once you can like gather all of the ideas and dump in one place, and then kind of take a step back and be like, okay, well, what matters? What do I need kids to get out of this week? And what do I as a teacher need to get out of this week? Because it sets a tone, right? What tone am I setting, and what is that going to include? Then that's where like a lot of the teaching artistry comes in. I know I just said that, but that's like, I've lost my point. Amanda, save me.
You're there. No, I'm with you. And I think to give you guys an example, okay, so when we say decide what matters to you, on this list are the things that matter to us. But maybe to you, deciding on a classroom or year-long theme matters to you. Like, I know there are a lot of teachers who really like to have a design element that links everything together, and that this is something that is worth your time. But for me, that doesn't have the type of return on investment that I want for my classroom. So that's why you need to know what matters to you. Classroom decor for me is a really dangerous place because it's a lot of fun to play, but it doesn't help me set classroom norms or expectations. It doesn't really help me build or start any routines that are going to be essential for the rest of the school year. I don't learn anything about my students through that effort. And it might help with community building. Like, I think having a welcoming environment in your classroom, virtual or otherwise, is definitely a layer. But is it a 2-week deep, dark black hole of color schemes? Is it worth that? Maybe not. So like, having a list of what matters to you basically just keeps you in check as you start to sort through the gathering of all the things that you did in step 1.
And I would say that like environment is absolutely one of the things that matters to me. And I know it matters to you as well, but like with environment, so if you're sitting here and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I was thinking about theme. Don't let us dissuade you, because that's absolutely, if you follow us on Instagram individually, you've seen our classrooms. Like, that's absolutely a huge part of our classrooms. But that for us goes into community, right? Like, who cares what it looks like if like the kids and you are not in a good class community? So it's kind of like all interwoven, and it just like, what matters though in that first week, because other things can come later. Decor can come later. Themes can come later. You don't have to have it all done day 1. What you do have to have done day 1 is like a syllabus, like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That is key, because that's what I'm saying is like, you got to know yourself. Like, I know myself. That matters to me a lot, and it's a lot of fun. So I know that what I would do when I'm, let's say with air quotes, like revising my syllabus, if I had 2 hours to revise my syllabus, I would spend an hour and 50 minutes on the design of it, which leaves me 10 minutes to actually revise the syllabus.
I've done that.
So, I've
done that.
This time of year is so stressful. So do yourself a favor and just try really hard to focus on what matters to you right away. And then let those other pieces fall into place, because no matter how awesome it is the first week of school, your decor and otherwise, or whatever those things are, the rest of the school year is coming.
Yeah. And if you burn yourself out that first week, which I've done, I mean, we're totally speaking from experience here. Like, you burn yourself out that first week, maybe that first 2 weeks, and then you're just like, oh my gosh, they keep coming back. School keeps happening.
That's the worst reality. Like, we really should plan for week 3.
And you're just like, oh, I have to go and do it, don't I? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me put my clothes back on. Here I go.
Oh God. Putting clothes on is the worst part. I would say actually, and I'll share with you guys a blog post I wrote last year, but I actually plan for the first 10 days. I try to have 2 cohesive weeks together before I move into unit 1, because that kind of gives me a breath, because I'm not like, okay, week 1's over, crash and burn. I know that it kind of continues on into the next week, and that helps. We won't go into that today, but you can plan for more than the first 5 days. You can stretch it out if that makes you feel better. But that's up to you.
Yeah. And your bell schedule. Like, I'm on a quarter system. I can only go 5 days, and then it's like, well, we got to get into some content now.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of content, let's move on to number 3.
Numero tres. Once you've got what matters to you guys, number 3, choose the ideas from your brain dump that fit what matters most to you. If it matters, then you want to make sure you cover it. The good news is that a lot of the activities that you're probably sorting through can do more than one thing on your list.
I love double dipping. Double dipping is the way. Or triple. It's the best.
And if you know, like, again, spending your time, like, if you don't know what your routines are, like, you should start there, right? If there are things that matter to you that you haven't figured out yet, like, figure those out and then build your activities to be things that reinforce that list of things that matter to you. Like, if you don't know what your classroom norms are, like, if you want to make rules together, that's fine. But like, you should know the type of classroom that you want to run. So there's a lot involved. So we're saying when you guys get to number 3, choose the things that fit that list, because all of a sudden your overwhelm has gone from 100% maybe down to 50%.
Yes. And you're still going to like run into some hiccups here and there and be like, oh, but I didn't get blah, blah, blah. Okay, well then maybe that fits in week 2, right? Or maybe that's something that kids could do on their own that doesn't have to happen in class on the first week. Like, that's where you start to find your wiggle room. If your list of what you're doing that combines, right, like all the ideas from number 1 and then like what matters in number 2, if number 3's list is getting like long to the point where you're like, this is now more overwhelming, I have more things than I have time for, revisit number 2 and start weeding things out again, right? I'm more of a sit down, get everything done in one sitting kind of a person, but my creative process can stagnate and I have to go take a 5-minute walk, 10-minute, 15-minute. Yeah, I can't like, you know how some people can like sit down and watch a show for a few minutes and defrag their brain. I have to like cook a meal and then I can sit back down. Like, I have to do something else, but it doesn't have to take very long. So you really, I basically what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be like a multi-day process planning out your first week. You could get this done in an afternoon if you've got that kind of a focus, but it might take you longer. It just kind of depends.
It totally depends. And I think what's going to help you guys is maybe hearing our plans and our examples. So let me just because I know we're good students and good teachers here, let's recap. So number 1, gather everything, get all the ideas, dump them out. Number 2, decide what matters to you, make that list. Number 3, choose the items from your dump that fit with what matters to you and be selective. Choose what really you think is going to be the best option to hit the most of those targets and move on, right? And like, start planning, get going, because the waiting part is also pretty rough. So I can go ahead and start, Marie, if you would like.
Yeah, you go ahead, because as we know, I'm still kind of sketching mine. So as she's talking, I might fill in more of my sketch.
Well, Marie has quite a few more weeks left before her actual start than I do. I'm like, we're go time, guys, in like 2 weeks. So here we go. So my first week is right now in 2 of my 3 courses, all virtual. My ELL class will be in person, me and my 3 students. If they decide to go to school, but that's a story for another day. So my virtual first week, I actually decided I wanted it to look a lot like what I normally do, because that my normal routine of what I do the first week of school hits all of these things. So for me, classroom norms have a lot to do with, I want the kids to understand that they're going to be expected to do a lot, that this is a junior level course and it's very different from what freshman and sophomore year looked like. They are upperclassmen. And so establishing that sense of higher responsibility, we're going to deal with more difficult texts. All of that's really important for me to establish at the beginning. Kids come in and think I'm really nice. That's sweet. But they also learn, and I want to make sure that they know that tough love is the name of the game in my classroom. I am tough with my kids, and it is kind of out of this idea that I think when we push our kids, like a lot like coaching, the harder you push, the higher kids are going to think of themselves and achieve. But I do that with support. So I really want them to know that. My routines, I have bell work every day. I want them to learn the bell work routine every day. And that was non-COVID. I'm going to try to keep the same thing. It's going to look different, but I want that routine to stay the same. So I want them to learn the routine and practice the routine. I also want them to learn and practice the routine of how we turn work in and how we get work. So basically that's like learning Google Classroom, my expectations for how that works. So those 2 routines, I mean, there's more, but I think those 2 are vital for the first week. Skill check. typically in the first week for me, I'm really only interested in writing at the beginning, because if I can get a writing sample out of kids, it gives me some time to read through it and, kind of sort out my brain. The second week is usually when I do some kind of Socratic seminar to evaluate some of those other skills, their reading and speaking and listening. So I spread those out amongst my 2 weeks. And then community building is, of course, super important. I want our class to be fun and crazy. And I really want to use the community building aspect to teach kids the way that we're going to act as a community in large group virtual meetings, small group virtual meetings, non-group work, and things like that. So yeah, it's a lot of things. So my first week, I can tell you 2 activities for sure that I've got planned. One of the things that I do every single year is a Meet the Teacher Day. That's an entire class period where I present a little story about my life, who I am, where I come from. I'm not from the place where I teach. So kids always find it kind of fascinating, because a lot of them are born, raised, and doing life in one spot. And that's a totally different experience than what I had. So I share that with them. And I share some of my travel experiences, all of the things that really make up my philosophy of education. I look them in the eye or through the camera, and I tell them, I have always wanted to be a teacher, and you are part of my lifelong dream. A couple kids start to cry, it's magical.
That's really cute.
I mean, it's true. And I know that when I tell kids that in the first week of school, some of them go, oh my God.
That's heavy. Yeah.
I better not let her down. And that's you better not let me down. But it's, I think they respect my transparency, my vulnerability, sharing that with them. So I try to do that. And then the lesson that goes with it is I kind of break the ice by sharing about me. And then I assign them a letter to the teacher. So I assign them a letter to Mrs. Cardenas, and they write me a letter. It's got some very basic expectations. And the cool thing about the letter is that when I look at my list of what matters to me, it's going to check a lot of boxes. I'm going to be able to talk about my routine of turning in and picking up homework, where all that is. I'm going to be able to check their skills on writing, also following directions, basic things, and even norms, because part of the norms is going to be one of the questions I ask them to respond to is, what do you expect from me and what can I expect from you? So I hit a lot of those things in that one assignment. So for me, every year, without a doubt, letter to the teacher happens, because it does all of those things for me. It's useful. If you've never asked your kids to write you a letter, I recommend it. This is where I usually find out details about my students that would have taken me months to learn. I've found out about students and having children, pregnancies. I've found out about parents who have passed away, divorced or custodial issues that are really sensitive. I learned about triggers to be sensitive to very early on. And I think a lot of it's because I'm super vulnerable first. And even the kids who write these open things to me in a letter would never, I don't think they'd even ever say it to me in person. I don't think they'd ever say it.
Well, and I think even just to touch on that, because I do a letter too, and you just made me realize how powerful that has the potential to be right now for those of us who are listening and planning right now going into the fall of 2020. Our students have had vastly different experiences with this pandemic and what has been going on in their lives, because their lives have kept going, right? And so things, I am very likely going to have a lot of the same students. I'll go through all of mine in just a second too. I'm likely going to have a lot of the same students that I've had for the last couple of years, because I keep oddly moving up with that. I keep changing my prep that it ends up moving up with my students, but they're kids, and it's been months since I saw them in person. So things are going to come out in letters. Yeah, I use a letter too, in a very similar fashion as a writing sample and as a way to build community and to do that sort of a thing. Did you finish all of your activities? Did I just cut you off?
Well, I have one more, but
okay, I'm sorry.
That was my first one.
Okay.
But you guys would be surprised. Do you know, Marie, what surprises me is how many kids tell me no one's ever asked me to do this.
I know. And I'm I thought we all did.
They're kind of floored. I mean, some of them really struggle to write it. They don't know what to say about themselves. It's just it's the simplest activity. It's not hard.
I know. It takes maybe 10 minutes if you just sit down and bust it out, right?
It does take me maybe like a week to read them all.
Oh, for sure.
Because I'm so like, into them. But anyway, so that's like my first like go to, it doesn't matter what day of like 1 through 5, like however that falls, but I will do that my first week. And then the second thing that I will do this year that I've done in other years is I always try to do some kind of activity that requires small group work, because that's an expectation and a classroom norm that we have. Every single week we do at least one book club meeting. So I want them very early to learn how they work, like the functionality of small group work, the routine of how we get into groups, how we come back to whole class. So like in the physical classroom, I would be using like my, I have my little doorbell. I use that for my small group work. For this year, I'll be teaching them about using Google Meets and how to break out into small groups and then come back to the whole class. So we're doing a Alaskan wilderness survival scenario. It's, again, super basic activity. This is not complicated. I'm asking the kids in their group to decide which 3 items they would take with them for a week in the Alaskan wilderness from a pre-designed list by me. So I wrote a list of really ridiculous things. Among them are a week's worth of grilled cheese, a bag of avocados, 3 copies of Lord of the Flies. Like things like this that are like super random, because I want them to talk about how random they are, because kids love random. And I want them to say, we're going to bring Lord of the Flies because that is what, like, we can use it for fire.
I was just going to say it's kindling, right? They're not going to use it as,
that's the word I was looking for. Kindling.
It's not going to be like a survival guide, right? Like they're not going to.
But you know, some smart kid, I mean smart blank, like smart ass kid, right? Some smart ass kid is going to say, oh, it's going to be our survival guide, right? So I give them, that's part of why I give them the list is like, I don't want you just to pick things. I want you to tell me that a week's worth of grilled cheese is what you need in the Alaskan wilderness. So how they're going to grill it, I don't know, but they're going to have all the ingredients. So maybe it's just Kraft singles for a week. That's going to be struggling.
I love when we have these conversations and you go first because I steal ideas from you.
I'm going to steal right back. So I'm going to wrap up because all this is to say is I choose my activities based on what matters to me and how many things I can check off the list, right? So the group activity, they're going to be community building, getting to know some new students. They're going to be skill check, having some discussion. They're going to be practicing a routine, check, norms, check. Like both of those activities check all of my boxes, and like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I love it. Okay. So yes, I'm ready. I am ready. I've had the idea. I've just been kind of like hashing a few things out. So that list of what matters to us, right? We had routines, we had skill checks, we had community. What was the 4th thing?
Classroom norms.
Oh gosh, classroom norms. Thank you. Like rules and expectations. Yeah. That's right. I actually have it written here. It just doesn't look like English. Fantastic. So I was like, wait a minute, I planned around this and I can't remember what it is. So I've decided, since I'm going to be starting in distance learning, I normally start on the very first day with stations, and I just give students like color-coded popsicle sticks, and that's how I group them, and they go through stations, and these stations have teeny tiny little activities. But the first thing that I get from them is a writing sample, and it's a letter to me, but it's an email. So it like hits a bunch of different things. So like I'm going to go through my little list of what matters to me, which does fall into our 4 little categories. But like, I know I want a writing sample. I know I want to talk about email etiquette, especially this year. I know I want at some point in that first week to read, because reading is a huge part, reading independently, reading with groups, discussing reading. So we're going to have discussion somewhere in that first week. Community, feeling a part of the community is more important now than ever. Yep. But even just in real life, it's important too. Like our students are at record levels of depression, right? And anxiety. And so like those sorts of things have become I'm more hyper aware. That was really correct. Routines like bell work, like using our LMS, which for us is going to be Canvas, and that sort of a thing. Another thing that's important for me this year, so it's kind of diverting from our little list, is that students are, well, actually, no, this is always important. It has to do with expectations, that students are prepared, that they are responsible, and that they are like self-aware and sufficient. right? Self-sufficient. I mean, in a high school classroom, I have an ask three, then me rule because
Yep.
kids are kids and they'll just ask you these questions and like, well, I thought there's no such thing as a dumb question. It's a dumb question if it's posted 5 places in the classroom and I just said it 3 times. Love you. That was a dumb question. That was a bonehead moment, right? Ask three, then me. So like in regards to that having to do with like teaching virtually, I'm going to do something where students they have to create a space and a schedule for themselves for their own learning, right? Yeah. So my first week is going to look like a choice board for students. It's going to be a 5x5 bingo card, hyperlinked, and I'm going to try and explain it without you guys having a visual. So the rows are going to go by day. So Monday row, because we're going to start on a Monday, which is odd. We normally start on a Wednesday, but this year we're starting on a Monday.
Us too.
We have a Monday row, which is going to be a single assignment, and it's going to be an email to me, the teacher, but then the columns have different themes. So like the first column is like travel. So they'll write me a letter on Monday that has certain criteria that they're like a very specific prompt. And part of that prompt is going to be about one of these themes. They're either going to choose the A theme, which is travel. They're going to choose the B theme, which is something about food. C, which is something about like entertainment. D, which is about sports, and E, which is about like our school and school spirit and that sort of a thing, which is an idea that Amanda gave me earlier. So like I will start by reading them. I always write an open letter to my students. So like I'll read them my letter, probably on a Good Morning Zoom call, I'm guessing, and then give them their assignment. And like through that assignment, they're going to have to navigate Canvas. They're going to have to find the first week's module. Like they're going to have to do a bunch of things and they're going to have to turn it in. So there's like a lot that can kind of layer into that. That's that double, triple, even quadruple like dipping thing.
The layers are where it's at. I love
the layers are where it's at. And it takes taking all the ideas in, sifting through them, and then you're like, oh, okay, I see what to do now. The Tuesday row, they're going to be doing their personal learning space and creating a personal learning schedule. And it really does start to reinforce in students that like, you are responsible. I am not going to be able to hold your hand, especially doing this virtually. Like there's only so much I can do. You have to step up to the plate. And so I think, I don't know, it kind of, I'm still working on that one, but they'll still have like within this personal learning space, I'm thinking there will be something, I want them to actually create their own personal learning space wherever they're living, but that might not be possible. So maybe it's going to be like a visual sort of a thing on like a Google slide. And it's like, well, this is what I would put in my personal learning space. Right. And so they'll then pick one of the theme columns that's like, I'll put a picture of Paris because that's where I want to travel, or I'll put a picture.
What if it was even like their like their student agenda notebook, even if it's not like the physical space, like how they're going to organize.
Yeah. Well, and like personalize a composition book kind of. Yeah. So I'm like
there we go. Yeah.
I'm getting there. Right. And so like so it'll still be like thematic in that way. And they're going to create a learning schedule for themselves.
Love it.
Based on, and they're going to have to go through their other classes to find out what the schedules are there. But like, I want them to like set it out and like either digitally or physically write out what is their week going to look like, because they need to see it in paper. There are not bells moving them this year from class to class.
Or me.
Or yeah, exactly. Or us. Yeah. And then Wednesday, they're going to have some sort of a reading. I'll give them choice in a reading and they're going to take a quiz. And it's going to be Sesame Street quiz because I want to have a little bit more analysis, a little bit more synthesis going into it. And then, and so they'll have choice of what they're going to read and it'll be based on those different themes. And then Thursday, I'm going to take another, like a legitimate writing sample where I might just have them watch a video, choice of videos, and give them a singular prompt. And then they're going to have to find a piece of evidence that addresses that prompt and analyze it. Right. So then I can get
puzzle, baby.
Yeah. So I can get some analysis.
Yeah.
And then Friday, we're going to have discussions. And that's where I was like, I'm totally stealing the scenario situation because I'll just have them choose which is the theme that you're going to go with. And that's how I'll create their small groups. And each group will have a different scenario that they'll have to discuss and then present.
Oh, nailed it.
Nailed it. Do you watch that? We've talked about this show.
Nailed it.
Absolutely love that show. Okay. But yeah, so that's, and like, as I go through all of this hits all of the things that I would normally hit in the classroom. And I'm like, wow, why have I never thought of this before? Yeah. I've normally done it with stations. It's because I normally do it with stations and they can have choice on a much smaller level, like just quieter. But now it's just like a broader, everybody can see what's coming and you can make choices along the way because that's a big part of my class too. So.
You know what, guys, here to kind of wrap things up, I think this is the last thing I think we should mention in closing is kind of like Marie said, her classroom used to have stations first. I used to have stations first as well. And as we were talking, we're also having the conversation of, is flipping exactly what you used to do into something digital worth it? Or is it better to just do something simple that accomplishes the same things and give yourself a break? And I think that's what you guys need to keep in mind too, is you don't have to have the perfect setup that you've had before if you're a veteran teacher. If you're a new teacher, you don't have to do all the things. You just need to do what accomplishes what matters to you.
Absolutely. Like,
that's it.
My stress level is so high. Like, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm stressed out. Like, I am having a hard time. And it's not that it feels impossible. It's just there's so many stinking variables and it goes against my very blood. Like, I can't take all the variables. And so for me, the idea of trying to flip stations sounds like minutia that my brain will stop working.
Right.
Rather, I need to broaden it. I need to make it a week-long process. I need things to weave into each other and I need it to flow a little bit better for my own sake. I'm seeing a lot of our friends, like in the ELA community on Instagram stuff, doing digital escape rooms, doing digital stations, and it's working brilliantly for them. It is super. I thought about it for about 2.5 seconds and then I was like, #no, I can't do it.
We are all in different situations. And like for me, the name of the game is I told Marie this the other day, I am compulsed to make everything original. Like it is a problem. And like, it's not necessary. Originality is not part of any of those check marks on my list.
Everything's original for our students. Everything is original for them. They have no idea what we're looking at on Instagram.
Oh my gosh. And so I'm trying to let go of that myself and just focus on what matters, focus on the kids. And like, also for me, and I don't know how you're feeling today, Marie, but like, I also want to have everything done. Like when my lessons are set on a day, I've got my doc hyperlink, like my calendar is filled up. That stress starts to melt away a little bit. And I know I need to be flexible, but knowing that my Meet the Teacher lesson video is recorded and the letter assignment is done, I feel good about that because that's one whole day.
Well, and you have flexibility. You could move it if you need to.
I can put it wherever
it's done and you can just go transfer. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm always feeling like I want things done. Like I plan at least a week at a time, if not more, because I plan a year at a time.
Correct.
But when it comes down to like making copies and getting things all created, I do things at least a full week ahead because I will forget. It's not that I need to be anal retentive about all of the organization. I will straight up forget for Wednesday. And I'll come in and be like, nuts. I didn't do it. So
it's all the time. So, I mean, let's just recap, shall we?
Yes.
For the last time. Okay. Everyone take a deep breath.
And remember, we have this in our show notes for you to download that has it all spelled out. Like if you're driving or walking, you don't have to have written this down. We have it for you.
And we're also sending you a virtual hug because you deserve it. Because we're getting treated it's pretty tough out there right now.
It is hard to be an educator. So, okay. Recap, Amanda.
Number 1, gather everything. Don't discriminate. Go for it and then dump it. Number 2, decide what matters to you. Sort it all out. Number 3, pick what matches each of those items. And that's your deciding factor. Finally, don't overthink the things that seem too complicated. Let them go for another time. Stick to what feels good and be done.
Yep. And with that, friends, I think we are done. Thank you so much for listening today. We hope that we have given you some places to start. Hopefully not so many ideas that it's overwhelming, but just a place to start and the agency to be able to figure it out. And what works for you does not need to work for me. What works for Amanda does not need to work for somebody else. Yeah.
You've got this. You've got this. Your kids are so lucky to have you. Remember, you are a teacher listening to a podcast about teaching, and probably with teachers' social media. Like, you are a nerd that loves your kids, and you're going to do an awesome job. And when I call you a nerd, it's a good thing, okay?
No,
it's a compliment.
It's camaraderie. Absolutely.
It is. Teamwork. We're all in it together.
Our show notes are over at bravenewteaching.com. We are always active on social media, especially Instagram. So check us out there. Please take a moment, if you have one, to give us a rating and review on iTunes. It helps other teachers find our little Brave New Teaching cohort that we have going on. And until we meet again, friends, thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.
Bye everyone.